want to do just a quick little
I
break
think
so
we
that,
need to take a break.
that maybe let people online know we'll start at
7:05.
okay.
Thank you. Fix that.
stay on something. That building's accomplishment. That's totally sound. Go right through town. Nice. During the meetings. What legalese do I have to make that?
That was gonna be awkward.
It's just gonna take me a second.
Spent $9,999.99 on making sure that we can close their power outlet.
We'll get you some closer tomorrow. Dawn had her way. You have your own dedicated room.
Be great. Which room does she have in mind?
No.
Let's acknowledge the trustees.
Yeah, that's those spots. Molly.
Oh,
Me either. Do you want to put her out?
welcome back, everybody. So we'll proceed with the open session now. We'll break. In the first order, we have two different sections of action items, but the first action item is swearing in Nicole Sterling. And
You need to call this meeting to order.
that's
Sorry.
right. ma'am.
Taking you back.
We have to terminate the executive session. All right, so I'd like to call at 7:10. I want to call the regular scheduled Board of Trustees open meeting, open session. And could you take the roll, please?
Yes, and before I do, I just want to remind everyone in the room and online to please speak closely into your microphones this evening, so that everything that you are saying can be heard loudly and clearly. Thank you. And so for roll, we have Mayor Giblin,
Yes, here.
Trustee Blakemore. Here. Trustee Corvallon,
Here.
Trustee Kingsley
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahold,
Here.
and Trustee Severs.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks a bunch. Is this a name that you go over, Miranda?
I would be happy to, unless you want to do so yourself. It's short and sweet.
Sure, why not? This is the oath of office for Nicole Sterling's trustee appointment. September 27th, 2022, the BOT appointed Nicole Sterling, it's bigger. Nicole Sterling to fill the trustee vacancy left by Johnny Ballmer. Sterling will serve his term ending in April 2024. Prior to serving on the BOT, Sterling must be sworn into office by completing an oath.
And yeah, if you'd like to come up front for that. Yep, yep. Or you could take Macy's.
And can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Let's repeat after me, raise your right hand. I, Cole Sterling, solemnly affirm
I, Nicole Sterling, do solemnly affirm
that I will support and uphold the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support and uphold the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
and the ordinances of the town of Nederland,
and the ordinances of the town of Nederland,
that I will faithfully and to the best of my skill and ability
and that I will faithfully and to the best of my skill and ability
perform the duties of the office of the Board of Trustees,
perform the duties of the office of the Board of Trustees
of the town of Nederland, upon which I'm about to enter.
in the town of Nederland on which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Get out of what
I promise. Yeah. Good one. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, everyone. So, the next thing on the agenda is consent. Back to the consent agenda.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There's actually a resolution with that matter. The resolution.
I move to approve resolution 2022-44, appointing Nicole Sterling as trustee.
Second.
I second that.
Steve Lakemore for now, for the first one. So do we have trustee Lakemore? Yes. Trustee Kings Isma,
Yes.
Mayor Giblin,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
and trustee Corvalon.
Yes.
You guys have to remind me if Nicole is called in this role or not. That's it. Motion passes.
Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate it. So now we'll move on to the consent agenda. And we have minutes from the September 6th and September 13th BOT meetings, and then the Board of Trustees vacancy appointment, which I think we already took care of. Anything on the consent agenda?
Right, so in the updated agenda that was sent out yesterday, we had removed this oath and the resolution to an action one. So the only things on your consent agenda are the 2 minutes to be approved tonight.
Okay. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
trustee Kings Isma,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
Mayor Giblin,
Yes.
trustee Sterling,
Yes.
trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
and trustee Lakemore. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Prior to providing comment, speaker must state their name and indicate whether or not they're a Netherlands resident. If not a resident, the speaker should indicate their affiliation with the town. We have one public comment that was submitted in advance. Does anyone else have any public comments? Non-agenda items. Anyone in the room? How about anyone online? Might be muted, so you might have to hit star six. Hearing none,
Billy, I'd just like to let the public know what the response from RTD was concerning the abandoned cars in the RTD park and ride that Roy Young wrote about in public comment.
thank you.
So I will just read the email from our board rep on RTD, Lynn Gissinger. She said she spoke with Steve Martingano, the deputy chief of the RTD Transit Police, about the abandoned cars at the park and ride. Statute requires that RTD post a notice at its lots for 90 days about the rules for parking. The notice was posted some time ago, and the 90-day period should expire on Friday. After that, the statute requires that RTD put notices on each car that the owner has for 4 days to move the car or it will be towed. There are a number of lots with this issue, but Nederland is high on the list. The cars should be posted next week and removed shortly after. I have copied Deputy Chief Steve Martingano here, and he said he is happy to answer any questions you have. Likewise, let me know if you have any questions for me. Best regards, Lynn Gissinger.
Thanks, Karen, appreciate that follow-up. There's nothing else on the consent or on the public comments, non-agenda items. We'll move into informational items, and we have Aaron Ladd and Rachel, I did not remember your last name. Bolt. Rachel Bolt here to do a presentation on.
Thank you. Aaron Ladd and Rachel Bolt from Branish and Reich, the town's water attorneys, provide an overview of the town's water rights. Excellent. Just to give an overview of where we're going to go, I'll give a quick water rights primer. Review of Netherlands water rights, starting with their senior water rights and junior water rights portfolio, sanitation plan, water storage, including Barker Meadow Reservoir and Netherland Reservoir, and water supply planning and growth. With respect to water rights are allocated in Colorado on the prior appropriation system, and so this means first in time, first in right, similar to mining law. What this means is that you're allocated the right to use water based on this began. So it's the term senior and junior often, and those are relative terms. If your water right is in 1880, you're junior. So we talk about juniors. We don't necessarily mean they have to better on for 100 years, but just means not in priority all the time. And then lastly, we'll talk about direct flow versus storage rights. So direct flow is the right to divert from the stream, whereas storage is the right to divert from stream and put that water away for. And then the other concept we need to review quickly is the concept of an augmentation plan. An augmentation plan allows a water user to divert under its junior water rights out of priority, so long as it can replace its depletions to stream in time, location, and amount. Usually that means some senior water rights during the irrigation season, and that is from storage during the non-irrigation season, in order to keep the river whole pursuant to an augmentation plan. An appropriation water begins with diversion and putting water right to beneficial use. There's a second way to do that. If you can't divert and put a water right to beneficial use, then you can go to water court and get a decree, saves your place in line priority, get a conditional water right, and that requires you to go back into water court every 6 years to prove that you have been diligent in developing the water right until you complete the appropriation. Oftentimes that's for more costly or complicated ones that take multiple years to. Next. I'll get into Town of Netherlands portfolio of water rights. The town actually diverts relatively junior water rights with priorities in the 1960s. And also purchased a while ago in the 70s senior water rights that were originally used for irrigation in the amount of 39.6 acre feet. We'll talk about what that means. Then the town also has storage in Barker Meadow Reservoir to store by contract with the city of Boulder. And lastly, a additional Nederland Reservoir water right. And so all of these rights are put into action through the town's augmentation plan that allows the portfolio to work and each piece to play its role to ensure a reliable water supply so the town can divert water for municipal uses on a daily basis.
Question, do we have an augmentation plan in place that's effective and has ever been challenged?
There is an augmentation plan in place, been in place since 1978, and has not been challenged, including an obligation to go back and prove that the underlying assumptions are still valid. A couple of years ago, the court confirmed that they were.
Does it need any updating, or are we in good shape?
In good shape, yeah. And some of the assumptions in the augmentation plan are favorable to the town of Nederland, so we wouldn't want to reopen that without a good need to do so.
Good, thanks.
Next slide. So this next slide shows the location of the diversions for the junior water rights. These are generally 1960s and 1970s priority. During much of the year, these are out of priority, requiring the augmentation plan to function. Next slide. This next slide shows the original point of diversion for the Farmer's Ditch senior irrigation water that was changed to augmentation. Times when Netherlands diversions are out of priority in the irrigation season, this water is left in the stream at this location shown in order to replace the depletions from the town, and any excess is stored in Barker Meadow Reservoir. Storage in Barker is in the amount of 39.6 acre feet pursuant to a contract with the city of Boulder. And the term for that is currently April through April 1, 2026. And town staff is negotiating to extend that storage contract. The town is also looking to develop a conditional water right called Nederland Reservoir that is for 100 acre feet of storage. It's currently not constructed. The next diligence requirement to go into court and prove that the town is developing this water right diligently is February 2024. The town has also identified alternate sites for storage for this location. Next.
What do we have to do by 2024 to make that real?
That is show progress. Yes, so the standards are that the town is diligently pursuing development of the water right, and that it can and will store that water within a reasonable time. And so the town needs to continue to develop the water right and meet some milestones in order to do that.
So by the end of 2024, we have to have a plan and be executing on it, and a judge has to agree that it's sufficient.
Beginning
at the beginning of 2024, that's correct.
Okay.
And so in terms of water supply planning, is an element of diversion. There's an element of depletion to the stream that needs to be replaced. And so focusing on the depletions to the stream that are replaced from the augmentation plan. The current augmentation plan allows for replacement of 39.6 acre feet. Current use is, as of 2020, was 15.4 acre feet. So there is 24 acre feet of unused capacity. And so this provides some unused capacity for development of new taps. Irrigation and surface evaporation from reservoirs, for example, are very consumptive. And so we want to make sure that the town is cognizant of approvals that would increase the amount of evaporation or irrigation that is required, because that could significantly limit additional growth that the town's current portfolio could provide. Also, the development of Nederland Reservoir for an additional 100 acre feet would significantly that ability to supply both the current needs reliably and then also future growth. And to account for the possible need to replace groundwater evaporation from those, it's possible that the Nederland Reservoir would need to be mine storage or some alternate storage. Next. That's all I have for you. That's my favorite slide.
What, let's just project ourselves to 2024. What is the judge going to consider to be sufficient progress? And what's our risk that something could happen that we don't anticipate?
Is that better? The town's been successful so far through 5 or 6 diligence periods in the last 40 years and continuing to evaluate storage alternatives. And so in the last diligence period, there were adequate activities to prove diligence. It's not uncommon that municipalities are given a 50-year plus runway to develop water rights. And so it's not uncommon to be in a circumstance where at the town of Nederland is saying where it's continuing to develop this water right, and it's still on track to do so, but needs to grow into the demand. So there's good case law that supports that premise.
I have a question about tab 1, and that is the agreement for the augmentation plan. On page 2 of that document, it starts listing some wells: Nederland well number 1, Nederland well number 2, 3, 4, a well at the high school. So my question is, do we still have those wells? Are they still in operation? Are they still supplying water for the town?
Yes, those are the junior water rights I was referring to. And you'll see in paragraph 8 on what's listed as page 4 of that decree, where the point of diversion for those water rights is changed to the town's current intake. So it says well, but it's now all taken at that same intake location.
Oh, okay, that's a little confusing. So the stream diversion, the Middle Boulder Creek, that was appropriated in 1916, but then there's these other water rights that have been transferred to the diversion from the creek.
That's right. There's actually a mix of somewhat senior water rights and junior water rights. And so, and then that's accounted for in the augmentation plan by giving a percentage credit attributable to the senior water rights that are sometimes in priority. And so it all goes into the accounting, into the accounting hopper in order to determine, well, what's the out of priority depletion that needs to be replaced.
Well, I wonder if we even want to consider those wells, because we have a 1 cubic foot per second intake from Middle Boulder Creek, which would supply 723 acre feet per year if we were in priority all the time. So if those wells are reducing our priority level, maybe we should not have those as part of the plan.
The junior water rights are really treated as a complex of water rights. And so there's probably some favorable elements of this and some unfavorable elements, but on the whole, you wouldn't get in 2022 what you got in 1978. And so, you know, since I started, it's been, this is a great deal for the town, and we should be content it's operating and working as a whole. Yeah,
If I have more questions, could I send them to you?
absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
In terms of you making your case to extend our progress, what would you like to have when you're going before and representing us? What would you like to have in hand in February 2024?
You know, I think like I said, the standard is that there's been conditional or diligent progress made. And so, you know, we had a good discussion earlier on, you know, what next steps we could see for that. And so I think the town staff can pursue that, and we can come back to the board and continue to pursue those avenues. And that'll help.
Any more questions for Aaron or Rachel? Yeah, actually, this group.
Oh, I have a question. This is Tanya.
Yes.
Can we ask for more from Boulder Reservoir, from Boulder when we go in 2026? Or is that number fixed?
As of what is permitted under the existing decree, 39.6 is based on the amount of farmer's ditch water that can be stored in.
Oh, I see.
And so
Okay,
it's
so-
tied to what you can make use of in the augmentation plan.
Okay.
Then you want to see if there was any public comment?
It is an informational item, it's the usual writing.
So it's up to you, Mayor Gillen, if you want to allow for public.
Sure. And you're right. Go ahead. You guys got 3 minutes, please, each.
Can you tell me what the current acre foot usage is daily in that one? 39.6.
I'm not sure I can give you a daily amount, because I tend to interact with this stuff on a monthly or annual basis, but the current depletion to the stream is approximately 15 acre feet.
50 acre feet.
15, correct.
And in terms of the town has 60 to 80 buildable housing sites, and perhaps other development, maybe another 39.6 adequate to cover the usage of that based on the current usage within the town, each household.
Yes, the town would supply approximately 80 additional households, I believe, on the current supply, but we'll need to look as building permits or occupancy permits are issued, we take those into account and make sure we know whether we're getting closer to that threshold or not. And so that's something the town tracks on an annual basis. And if there were ever a big influx, then typically what municipalities do is ensure that there's additional water coming to the town can use in order to make up for that additional demand on the system as they approach that threshold.
We have about 750 houses now, somewhere in that category, using 15 acre feet. So if we were actually to double that, we'd be using 30 acre feet.
So
It appears that there's adequate water for maybe another 50 commercial units.
But you'd have to look, especially commercial units is a very different calculation. So commercial needs to be evaluated on a case by case basis.
Request the board to see if that kind of calculation could be included in any further studies that you do on this to see what redevelopment impact this ratio. Thank you, sir.
So
Thanks, Charlie.
I'd like to make a clarification on the water usage. So the attorney mentioned 15 acre feet as being used. That's used out of our augmentation plan. So that's when we're out of priority. According to our master infrastructure plan in 2020, the town used 0.153 million gallons per day. That is 55.84 million gallons per year. That is 171 acre feet per year. So out of that 171 acre feet per year, 15.4 was when we were out of priority, and so we were using the augmentation plan, which was farmers ditch. The remainder was a direct diversion from Middle Boulder Creek.
It's 1250 Eldora Road. Congratulations. I've talked to most of you guys about water. My family is the one that has the property around where the holding ponds are for that what you're calling the reservoir. Okay. Nobody has reached out from you all or the town to talk to the landowners about this process. Jackie. I want to work with the town, but I certainly can't do that unless you all talk to me and tell me what you need. This is something that I have been working on with various town administrators, various trustees, various public works people for close to 10 years, seeing this coming down the pike. And I think there are solutions to the problem that Nederland is eminently facing, but there needs to be communication. And I think thinking outside the box is an important thing. We are at the mercy of fires, floods, a lot of different things that can, have an effect on the water storage that Nederland has. So I think thinking of alternatives is a good component to the process. And I would ask a question, and y'all, water people, know this better. This spring, we had an enormously high runoff. When there is a runoff that is so much higher than a normal runoff, we were talking it at about little over 500 CFSs, and normal runoff is about 350 to 400. When there's that extra, is it possible for the town to pull excess off and store that? Or does that belong to somebody way down the road? That's just in a normal year, well, in a normal year, when you have extra snow, extra runoff, extra. So how do you calculate if there's more snow, produces more water that isn't necessarily allocated to somebody in particular? Can that be siphoned off and held? And if so, that's one way of, you know, inside a little bit of water here and there whenever you can. And I look forward to working with this board on this situation. And I would like communication though. Okay, thank you. And I hope you can answer some of those questions.
I'd be happy to, thank you. And I guess from my perspective, I understood you had been talking to some other administrators in the past and maybe Ms. Fisher as well. So I apologize if you don't feel communicated with. As for the runoff, there's maybe two answers to that question. One, in years when there's excess runoff or the runoff isn't timed for the uses, sometimes that happens where the runoff happens after most storage reservoirs are filled. Then there is excess water that can be stored in junior storage water rights, diverted from the stream. And then other times, perhaps it's a late runoff, but the irrigation demand hasn't come on the stream yet. And so at those times, there might be sort of a mistiming between the runoff and other demand. And so in a lot of those circumstances, there is an opportunity to pull excess water off and store it. Sometimes that can be done under a free river condition, or it can be done under a junior water right, such as the town of Nederland reservoir. So that's sort of what we're talking about is, you know, how could that be stored and where? So.
Thank you.
I did have to meet a few common users, so Star Six, if you'd like to make a comment.
Sounds like hearing done. We'll go ahead and close out. Well, actually, are there any more questions from anyone on any trustees? Or Aaron and Rachel? Okay. Well, thanks for your time. We appreciate you guys being here today.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, folks. All right, now we move back into our second round of action items. Action item now, we're going to do a special review use for Trace Gringos. Again, we will have public comment later on here. It may be given for each, or for this action item, when I call for it, it's limited to 3 minutes. Prior to providing comment, you just state your name and indicate whether or not you're a Netherlands resident. If not, state your affiliation with that. So, Miranda, could you just call what is name, please?
Yes. So tonight before you is a consideration of a public hearing and special review use related to outdoor eating and drinking at Trace Gringos Cantina LLC, which is located at 20 Lakeview Drive, Unit 207. And the applicant is in her word. Trace Gringos, like many other establishments, have been operating under a temporary modification of premises license that we put into place during COVID-19, which allowed the applicant to take the 2 front spaces outside of his building and allow for outdoor dining in a sectioned off area. So what the applicant is asking from me today is to make this a permanent SRU to allow him to continue to operate it. Currently it's up year round and continue to operate in that space. He did have a temporary SRU through September. He recently allowed for a continued modification of premise extension. So he is currently operating under that through the end of the year, but again, is seeking that permanent SRU. This would be for outdoor sales, eating and drinking, and other commercial activities, which is required, and SRU is required under section 1632. This went before the Planning Commission in August, and the only major concern that the Planning Commission shared was what Marshall Beinlevin at the time and Marshall Andrew Jocelyn had also shared. It's just concern about the speed in which people drive down Big Springs, and is that location secure enough there was a request to have some more substantial protection of the area. And so the applicant is willing to install Jersey barriers on the 3 open sides to allow for it to be more secure. There was quite a bit of discussion about this, but ultimately the planning commission felt that that was appropriate. So we do have Dan on with us, and if it's okay, Mayor Giblin, I'd like to turn it over to him to share why he's interested in this SRU.
Thanks, Dan. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks for having me this evening. And, you know, pretty cut and dry from what I shared with the Planning Commission and what Miranda's certainly gone through with me on this is just to continue to operate like we have for the last couple of years with the onus being on safety and really providing a space that was not only safe for people to come and use and have a different flavor in town, but also with the outside use being safe for people to ultimately feel they wouldn't have any perils there. So for the community, mainly, we really thought that was also a really good piece of this puzzle, is to make it as safe as possible by adding those Jersey barriers, which we've already added, several $1,000s in the outdoor seating, as well as the barrier. We had put up a barrier with lights. So we've always kind of come from the understanding that we wanted to make it very visible. And also, we don't operate after 8 o'clock at night outside ever. And I know that Marshall had shown a couple of different scenarios around the country in big cities that happened either at noon or at midnight or 2 in the morning with very busy traffic lanes. So I just don't know that we have that scenario where we are on Big Springs. And I lived in Nederland for 12 years. So I certainly understand. I lived right off of Big Springs. And I know that road can get speedy, but at that very bottom part, we haven't witnessed just how speedy it's been or out of control that somebody's been. But I think the Jersey barriers would eliminate any more issue.
What's a Jersey barrier?
So it's a concrete structure. They come in different types of structures. They can be plastic and filled with water or sand. And basically they're in a 2.5 foot tallish by probably similar base that form a wall, a pony wall, if you will. And you'll see them in construction zones. You'll see them on freeways when they're doing an off ramp or on ramp that's needs to be guided and protected.
Thanks. So I want to open it up to the trustees if there are any clarifying questions to ask either Dan or Brenda. Just try to keep them specific, clarifying questions about what we've heard so far before we open up for public comment.
This question is for Miranda. I've not seen the Jersey barriers in the SRU agreement.
So that can be added as a condition if you'd like. The planning commission did not make a motion with that specific condition. I think there was just a general agreement that yes, the applicant would, but if you'd like it outlined, you can do so in your motion.
Sounds good.
Hi, this is Tanya. Are all your neighbors okay with it since it affects their parking?
Yes, we've actually, not only did our neighbors, but Mr. Tebow was one of the regional people to sign off on this. So we've had many of the neighbors sign a testimonial or some kind of a sheet saying that they approve what we're trying to accomplish here. I
Great,
think Miranda has a count on just how many of those we have.
great, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, the only reservation that I have is the Jersey barriers, honestly. I think that it looks quite nice right now. Jersey barriers are pretty hideous. I'm not sure that I've seen any particularly dangerous driving around that area myself or high speeds. Seems like an unnecessary cost and kind of a shame for the for the way that the restaurant looks. So if we are passing it with conditions of Jersey barrier, I mean, the way that I would look at it would be that I hope Mr. Harrow would be able to potentially make them in the style of Tres Gringos Cantina as much as possible to maybe.
Thank you for that. That was not my, the original point is being function over form. Uh, but form, as you know, if you come to our restaurant, is really important for the environment that we're trying to create for people to have that experience. So I spoke earlier with my GM and chef today. We've already got some ideas on how to beautify those barriers to kind of blend in as opposed to stick out. But again, the real reason is just to give the confidence to the consumer and to the citizens of Nederland that we're doing our best on multiple levels to make sure we provide a safe environment for anybody that decides to consume there.
Great, I'm glad to hear.
And we not require that they do Jersey barriers. I think we can just leave him to decide on the Jersey barriers on his own. We don't have to dictate any of that. As far as I'm concerned.
General feeling on it as well.
There is a huge cost of these, by the way, folks. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there is a huge cost. So I appreciate the navigating of that. I really believe. I'm sorry.
No, you just had some feedback. It was actually your voice.
Oh, okay.
Tom, do you have?
I really feel that it makes most sense for us the cars are normally parked there and they provide that coverage on the sides, the west and the east sides. My only concern is that side that's opposite of Black Forest. It is open to elements. There isn't a lot of protection. We've all driven on the roads there when they can get crazy and icy, and you really can't stop your four-wheel drive when it starts to go a particular direction. So I would just like to at least have the option at some point in cost as well to be able to afford at least that southernmost version to protect what cars are already doing on the west and east sides.
Sounds good to me.
Question, just looking at the structure and it looks permanent, but like what is the plan for the winter when it's not so lovely to be outside?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that question, sir.
What's the plan for the winter when it's too cold for people to eat outside?
Well, it's interesting. We've done this the last couple winters now, and we have Eldora right up the road, and there are lots of folks in the afternoon who'll come down the road and want to have some food, and they're already in their gear and they're used to sitting outside. So we kind of thought that too in the beginning, but it's kind of solved itself. There's beautiful days in January and February in Nederland that people really want to be outdoors.
Okay, cool. So this would stay out year round. It sounds like it.
It would. Yeah, there's really no plan for us to take it down.
Okay.
Can we approve this?
So, thanks, Jesse. Appreciate it. But we'll go to public comment right now, and we don't have anyone in the room I can think of that would have a comment. So, we'll open it up to folks online. *6 if you are needed.
I'd like to give public comment.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Kathleen Chipeye, 31-year resident of East Magnolia and 19-year business owner. I am in support of this being approved, but I'm a little concerned at why it's being presented as a resolution. I want to make sure that that the Tres Gringos is going to have legal authority here. Resolutions have no legal authority. There's no enforcement. I don't understand why this isn't just an SRU that on the agenda as an SRU and on the agenda as you guys are going to vote on an SRU approval with a stipulation that's being made today. So I'm a little concerned that this is not the first time that resolutions don't seem to make sense to me. And I noticed there's also a resolution when we changed the parking in the middle of Ron Mitchell's SRU, that change was a resolution, and it's actually now inserted in the code online, cited as if it was an ordinance, which isn't making sense to me. So maybe someone with town staff can explain why this is a resolution, and maybe some kind of I just don't feel like there's anything binding here, and that the restaurant isn't going to be protected in the future. So those are my concerns.
So I was just going to say that the resolution is only to approve the signing of the SRU agreement. That's for the mayor to sign the agreement. The SRU will be approved as an SRU, not as a resolution.
Right, so tonight, the two proposed motions is to approve the SRU and then also to approve the resolution as well. So you would take both actions. But there is an SRU agreement in the agenda packet.
I didn't catch why there's a resolution in addition to the SRU.
It's to authorize the mayor to sign the agreement, the SRU agreement. So we pass a resolution to authorize the agreement.
And it formalizes the vote that you're taking as a board of trustees to approve the agreement, rather than having to go back to the minutes and find in the minutes where you voted to approve the SRU agreement. So it's a way to show that the board of trustees voted on approval of the resolution and then to sign the agreement.
Especially considering that the SRU application might not be the same content as what's in the agreement, because we might pass the SRU application with conditions which would modify the agreement. So it makes sense that it has to be two things.
Yeah.
If you look at the agenda, pages 77 to 80 are the resolution, and it talks about approving the SRU, and then pages 90, and a few pages, is the actual SRU agreement.
You might be working off an old agenda because your page is different.
Could be, because there have been numerous agendas.
Yeah, you're not working off the
So,
update.
well, there are four pages at least on the resolution, and another looks like 4 or 5 on the agreement. So they're separated. Yeah. Are there any more public comments? Hearing none, we'll bring it back we'll close the public comment. Bring it back to the board. Final deliberation.
I have one question about the planning commission's recommendation. They did not include the Jersey barriers, so can you explain that, Miranda?
So their recommendation was to approve that SRU agreement as written.
So I would move to approve the SRU application for Tres Gringos without conditions as written.
Second.
I would second that. This is Tanya.
I guess the only question I have is if Dan was asking that we include the Jersey barriers in case he wants to put Jersey barriers.
But he could do that anyway, right?
As far as I'm concerned, but I don't know if he needs our special permission to do that. No. Then we'll just let Dan find his way.
If you're asking my opinion, I would love to have the latitude to do
That's what
do
we're
it appropriately, to find the right thing that would fit in the right area.
Yeah.
If it was unconditional, it would just give me the flexibility. I'm still going to go through with what I said I'm going to do, because I believe in I was part of the solution for this, and I've always been part of the solution for this restaurant since its inception. So I don't want to stop now. I just think it's the right thing to do. But I would appreciate it being open-ended for me to be able to do it when I could do it and do it right.
I think I heard a motion.
Thank you.
In a couple seconds. So let's go ahead and move to a roll.
Trustee Guzman,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
trustee Blakemore,
Yes.
trustee Sterling,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahol,
Yes.
trustee Corvalon,
Yes.
and Mayor Giblin.
Yes. So the motion passes. And
I move to approve resolution 2022-45, approving the Trace Rios SRU agreement without conditions.
Second.
Go ahead and take the roll.
Thanks,
Eric, the school in me. I love it. Eventually I'll learn.
Trustee Sterling,
Yes.
trustee Severs,
Yes.
trustee Blakemore,
Yes.
trustee Kuzma,
Yes.
Mayor Giblin,
Yes.
trustee Corvalano,
Yes.
and Mayor Pro Tem Mahol.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the resolution and the SRU application both pass. Thank you for your time, Dan.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all of you.
Thanks for your patience too. I know we had to move this back on you. Now we're going to move on to discussion items. First discussion item, there will be time for public comment again 3 minutes later on. But first, 9.1 is a right-of-way vacation request. Joel. Go ahead.
So property owner Ron Mitchell has submitted a request for vacation of right-of-way. What he's asking is that the town vacate the alleyway north of Second Street. The request to vacate a right-of-way is governed by the town's disposal of public lands policy and the Colorado law on the vacation of right-of-way. That policy for your consideration in the packet, as well as more information about some of the evaluating criteria that should go into this, that's located on page 1 and 2 of the AIM. Just a little bit more information, and the applicant is here to explain more, but Ron is seeking to widen Second Street, which would make it straight and less narrow. So the reason why he's looking to vacate the alleyway is because he would be losing some of his property in doing so, and he'd like to be able to gain back that by vacating that alleyway to the north. Ron Mitchell has provided a narrative in the packet, and then again, he's here to speak to that. There are no concerns from town staff or the Nederland Fire Protection District. This is the Board of Trustee decision, which is why it's coming before you. You have referred previous right-of-way vacations to the Planning Commission. So a motion to refer that to the Planning Commission is an option, but ultimately this is the Board of Trustees decision.
I have a quick question. If we were to do that, where does that fall in sequence of this process? Or Ron, talk with us first.
Yeah, so we'll run with it. That's a motion you can make at the end. You would move it to an action item. Yes, that's right.
I think you could do a nod of board direction to the planning commission. You don't have to move it to an action item.
Okay.
Great. And so if that were to occur, that would go before the Planning Commission in October and then come back before the Board of Trustees with their recommendation. But again, Ron Mitchell is here if you'd like to invite him to speak.
Yeah, Ron, if you could come up to the mic, and I think the camera's good, isn't it?
Way back when Nederland was being formed, Barry Roos and Swoky were competitors for subdivisions. They ended up with Wookiees being on the Snyder being on the south side, but they didn't match up. So there have been various surveys, and one of the surveys, which was goes my property line right through the center of the street. That's an untenable situation for all of us. So Lisa Dell, I went to him and said, what do we do? We have 3 surveys, none of them match, they don't make sense. So he came up with a plan that straightens Second Street out along the north side and takes away property that would be obviously useless to me, but certainly of much value to the town or the street, because the street's already there. So I'm asking that you vacate the alley because it'll give me a setback, and your advantage is it puts really useless land, because right in the middle of the alley is the creek. So there's really no public function that will ever be used on that land, but it would allow me to have greater setback and put the property back on the tax roll, so we would have additional tax revenue. That's pretty extend.
Is there any immediate clarifying questions for or Miranda?
I do have one question. We're talking about widening Second Street there. So that would be some kind of construction project would happen there.
No, that gives you the street
Okay.
that you already have.
I didn't know if you had anything planned for that widening effort, or if it was just
No, it would
on the
be
plat that's widened.
making a property line evaporate. That could be a problem for all of us.
Understood, thanks.
It's just moving the line to reflect reality.
Yeah.
I want to offer clarification though that the right of way needs to happen first before we then look at the plat amendment. So this is being split into two separate discussions, starting with the right of way.
So I looked at the Boulder County Assessor's Office or at the property lines there, and they seem to align with the street. So I know sometimes the surveys are done relative to points rather than absolute surveys. And so I'm a little bit confused about this whole thing. I think we'd have to like look at all these different surveys and see what kind they were and
Well,
what the Boulder County has for.
the surveys differ by something like 12 feet. It's a significant space in terms of the street. So please, I mean, tries to make the most for everybody. Can, he's willing to come on and discuss it right now if you have a question for him. I'm a surveyor, I can't give you the really technical details of how he solved the problem, but his recommendation is what's in the packet. Spent a lot of time there trying to find points that make sense.
Yeah, I'm familiar with his work and he does a really good job.
He's been straightening out land disputes in that order for 30 years.
Just be busy. Well, thanks. I personally would like to make a motion to move this to the PC for them to review, planning commission for them to review. I'm sorry, I don't want to waste your time around. One thing we talked about, some emails about earlier, was just the possibility of changing our land, changing our, looking at our public lands policy and maybe making it in the future so that things go to the PC first to kind of streamline and save someone this kind of convenient, time-consuming stuff. So nonetheless, I would like to make a motion to move to PC.
I was going to bring that up in other business that we should maybe change the
Yeah.
process just so it just happens.
So sorry about this. Well, I want to make that.
I mean, I have no issue with this at all. I really think this is something that we could prove. I'm not sure that the planning commission's going to find anything that contradicts anything said in this application at this point. But I do think that in the future, we should just send stuff to the planning commission right off the bat so that we don't have to have this conversation every time.
So, I'll second the motion and then I think we can have some discussion after that.
So it's a discussion item, so there is no motion.
Oh, okay.
You just not nominate.
So
And it doesn't need public comment.
The planning commission is responsible according to the municipal code to review right of way vacations. And they do have the expertise in land use. And so I think it's important for any right of way vacation request to go first to the planning commission to get their expert recommendation and then come to us. So I would agree, I would nod to send this to the planning commission and have it come back to us after we get their recommendation.
And yeah, seeing as this is a discussion item and not an action item anyway, and we're not proving it or disapproving of it today anyway, I say send it to the PC and can't hurt.
Question, when is the next time they could look at this, and is there any hardship being created by making this go that route?
So they can review it at their October meeting, but I only wrong. It's
October
October
26th.
26th.
Will that cause hardship for you? Or what hardship would that cause, I guess, if we were to go that route?
And just a point of clarification that vacation of right of way needs to be done by an ordinance. So it could not be done tonight because an ordinance isn't drafted.
So there's lots of things that are going to delay this anyway.
So I do have a question in general on the process. So if it goes to the PC on October 26th, and then does it have to come back to us first to get an ordinance and then come back to us again to get approved, or does the ordinance get written after the PC meeting?
The ordinance could be written after the planning commission meeting. I'm hearing some favorable comments from you.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a draft ordinance next time it comes before the BOT. That's something we can mount forward on.
Yeah. Hey, Miranda, is there any town, it says there's no conflict with town on this. Is town in agreement with the screwy sort of platting of it?
Well, I can't comment on the plat. I can only comment on the right of way at this time, that we have no concerns with the right of way. When we come back before you for the plat amendment, that's when I'll get staff feedback specifically on that application.
But isn't it related? The reason there's a right of way is because the plat is in the town street, or the town
So
street's in his land, is what he's saying. That's kind of how I interpreted it, the whole
Right,
thing.
but we have to handle them separately, and therefore there would be two
It's
applications.
strange to handle it separately when the only reason you'd be giving them our land is because it's like a trade almost, but I guess that's not how it is.
So we can't amend the plot lines until we know that town has in fact given the right of way. There would be no point in doing a plot amendment without that.
Oh, no, yeah, I just mean like the current lot line is Town Street in this property currently?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was getting at, because Karen was like, oh, on the map, it showed that it wasn't, but it is, that is a fact, correct?
According to Lisa Dale, who's the county surveyor,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine as in the planning commission, but I also feel like now we're wasting everybody's time again, 2 more times for something that most likely doesn't have any conflicts or problems. So I think we all need to be mindful of everybody's time. And that setting a planning commission sounds really easy for us to do, but now they're gonna have to sit, spend 20 minutes, comes back to us. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just like, certain situations, I think we are capable of making decisions. This isn't like that complicated.
Not a 3 so far, so. Done.
I mean, either way, we're going to be waiting. And so the question is whether or not the PC looks at it or doesn't look at it. My feeling is that PC would like to look at things that have to do with land use in town. I don't want to step on their toes. I don't think that we'd be, I don't think they'd construe it as us wasting their time.
And Ron said he's fine to wait, so.
And the meeting is in a couple of weeks.
Generally, when things go to the PC, does that really inform the ordinance that gets written?
Probably not in this particular situation, no.
I think it's so simple and straightforward. It'd be nice to just prove it. I think we can, I'm okay with sending it to the PC if we want to just get the PC.
I haven't looked at this in a lot of detail, and I'd like to, for the planning commission to have an opportunity to do that before, well, we do an ordinance to vacate the right of way.
And they can spend as much time on it as they see fit as well. And then, it's kind of up to them how much time they use.
Yeah, I'm gonna stand by my nod for now, or I'm gonna stand by my nod, because if nothing else, if we can establish a precedent and consistency, that might be more important in the long run, and maybe more important, well, maybe next time, what Ron, you're helping us do is just save this step in the future and just go straight to the PC and then come to us with an ordinance. For sake of long-term gain and the fact that you're not expressing a hardship for 22 days. stick with my minute, but we only have 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Nod.
We have a verbal. Thanks for your patience. Hopefully this will improve the process for others, and hopefully all the things will move through smoothly. Expect they will. Oh, we need to hear public comment. Folks in the room, as well as, actually, how about we can start with folks in the room? I'm sorry, I'm opened up for public comment. Anyone, or does anyone in the room have public comment? We'll go to folks on the line. Does anyone on the line have a public comment?
I'd like to give public comment.
Go ahead.
Kathleen Chipai. I am a little concerned that the Board of Trustees or the elected members, this is a decision that can be made by the Board of Trustees. It could have been made probably tonight. I want to back up everything Tanya just said. I feel like you guys could have passed something tonight, and I don't understand the splitting up of the situation either. This seems to be just a swapping of pieces of land, and I don't know. Again, policy and procedure. The Planning Commission is an advisory board. They're not elected, and I can't stand hearing them called that they're expert advice. It's not expert advice. It's an advisory panel, and really it doesn't have to be consulted on every issue that comes before the Board of Trustees. This seems outrageous that it's going to have to go through any kind of procedures, because it sounds like there isn't any issue and you guys are all in agreement that it's probably a good idea to start cleaning up the zoning lines in town. And, you know, that's all I'm going to say. Again, I don't want anything passed that says send it straight to the Planning Commission. You guys were elected, and there's easy peasy stuff like this that doesn't need to take 2, 3, 4 months. You know, give yourself some credit, and there aren't, these people on the Planning Commission are not specialty in planning and zoning in any way, shape, or form. So let's stop imagining and wishful thinking that they are. They're not.
Thanks for your comment, Kathleen. Any other comments? Comments from folks online? Hearing none, to our out of 4 and close out this item for today.
Can we move the land vacation policy to an action item to add review by the Planning Commission for all right-of-way vacation requests?
Direct town staff on a discussion item to make changes. So you don't have to move it to an action item.
So we can direct staff right now during this discussion item to do that?
I think it's probably better as other business to do it.
Okay.
I think it'll be brought up in other business. Yep.
Ron Mitchell's
So I think I know that I think we're done with discussion item 9.1 for today, and we'll move on to 9.2, the annexation ordinance. Actually, does anyone need a break? Jennifer, Attorney Manson, and Trustee. That's how it reads. I don't know.
Listed on there because in the initial drafts of these. So I'm not going to take a lot of time in going over the introduction. In the packet was a draft ordinance, a draft annexation agreement, and a very detailed draft annexation agreement with the development agreement. Detailed draft would need probably a lot more work in terms of it wasn't vetted by anyone on town staff. Aaron Ladd, the water attorney, didn't look at it, so those are some additional steps that I would like to take, if that's something that you would like to have included with this annexation ordinance or an annexation packet. So I will just open it up for questions on the ordinance or any of the other attachments.
Yeah, it did seem, if we could just address the agreement quickly, like that the main point of interest in it was the agreement not to modify any SRU or PUD or any agreement that came with, for, I think it was 10 years, it said in the agreement, at least in the draft that you presented there. It's like it was 0.3 of 3 points and 1 and 2 were blank. You know, it was just to add that in there. So that's not in the ordinance itself. It's only in the draft of the agreement. Right.
Correct.
But it would be, right, in the official.
In the agreement, yeah.
I think, Tanya, go ahead and clarify your question.
Oh yeah, I like that part about the 10 years. And it just, I would hope this all gets put in.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that that was called out in the agreement, but not in the ordinance. I think that that's how it should be, personally. I think we should have the flexibility to extend that or shorten it, depending on what the town wanted to do, but that it should be part of the boilerplate agreement.
Well, and also with an agreement, it's something that would be binding on both the town and on the property owner. Whereas an ordinance code language can be changed by a future board. So it's more difficult to amend an agreement at a later date than it is to amend the ordinance.
That makes sense. More binding.
I do have a short list of things to address on the ordinance language, but if anyone else wants to go first.
Just can I really quickly, we're getting feedback from people online that it's hard to hear, and so we're just asking that you move closer to your microphones when you're speaking for the people online.
I just
Have
want
to swallow it if I were any closer.
and maybe it's the way we point, maybe it's the direction, to be honest. That we're doing clarifying questions right now, and then we'll get into public comment, and then we'll come back for final.
I have a question. Why 10 acres for a impact study?
That's actually state law.
Okay.
And it's 10 acres for the impact study.
But would less still require like parking studies and whatnot? Is that different than an impact study? I saw a parking study was in some of it, but
yeah, you can require parking studies. I mean, you can really decide what you want to require from an applicant for annexation.
But is a parking study in there? I thought I saw there was one, but not where exactly is it? I'm looking and I can't find it.
I'm looking too.
Yeah, me too. I can't remember if it's in the impact statement or if it's outside of the impact statement.
So what's the difference between an ordinance and the agreement? So are they both binding? Because you say one thing's in the ordinance and not in the agreement, it makes me nervous.
The ordinance is kind of like, so it can stay or it can be changed by governments along the way. An agreement will be a set between the annexee, whatever the word is, between two parties. And then it will be set by whatever the terms of the agreement are. A board can't come in.
I mean, then it could just be that you make an agreement with somebody's going to annex and not have that 10 years in there. That's correct, right?
Right, a future board could remove that if we put it in the ordinance, and then it would change the law for everyone. Whereas if it's in the agreement, then it's more permanent.
Right. So would you put it in the agreement or not? That's the part I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, the agreement.
Okay, that's the part. Thank you.
So I did have a question. 15-12, which I didn't write down which letter it was, but there's something in here that I don't understand the meaning of. Is an annexation map land surveying standards checklist. I don't know what that is. Could anybody clarify what that is for me?
1512.
Yeah, it's under 1512, and it's one of the letters, seven.
Page 142.
Yeah. I don't know what an annexation map land surveying standards checklist is.
It's under section 1512 and it's number 7. That's on page, well, I'll take a page.
142. All right, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one who doesn't know what this is. I don't want to require something that either A, doesn't exist, or B, nobody knows what it
Well,
is.
in full disclosure, this is, as I'm sure you know, it's
Yeah.
the Lions Code.
Yeah.
So
I'd be happy enough to strike that because I don't know what it is. But
let me look at it
Yes,
and see
please.
if there's a particular reason, why it would be in here.
Mhm.
And I will follow up on that.
And then in 15-13, we have language that says a reasonable amount of time. Within a reasonable period of time, town staff shall. Everything else is so tightly scheduled, like in some cases, maybe too tightly scheduled in this. Should that not also be scheduled?
So, I think that the timeframes are contingent on state law related to setting the hearing date. After the board approves the resolution to
Right.
set the hearing date, it's 30 to 60 days. That's why you have the super tight timeframes. This really gives some leeway in terms of getting everything together with the applicant, making sure the applicant is ready for the annexation process, also ready for whatever land zoning application process, everything else, so that the town staff and the applicant have some time to work together.
Yeah, yeah. I just wouldn't want to create a situation where town staff could like delay it coming to the DOT. And I guess the question of like, I don't know what reasonable actually means, like legally.
Reasonable in this situation would mean that town staff is working diligently with the applicant to make sure the application is complete and to bring it before the Board of Trustees.
Okay, and then in that same section, this is a little nitpicky, but it says if the application is rejected, the applicant shall then correct any deficiencies. I mean, could be may, right? Because they don't have to resubmit it.
Yeah.
And then it should probably say resubmit the required number of copies of the application rather than just submit. There's just a few shall and mays that I was worried about. Yeah, then 15-16, this goes to that timeline of 7 days to prepare and 7 days to sign. 15-16. Yeah, this is really tight turnaround for town to prepare because it could be 7 days because it could be within 30 days that we're having the hearing, which means 3 weeks in advance. Yeah, it could be very, very tight. Is there any way to, is that required by law? Can that be extended?
No, it can be an extended, this 15-16 is not required by law.
Okay, so like, it just seems more reasonable if that were, 2 weeks for town to prepare and then 3 weeks after to be signed. So I'm sorry, I'm thinking of it in the reverse. So before the public hearing, we should have the signed copy probably a week in advance. I don't see a reason to have it 2 weeks in advance, giving the landowner, the applicant, time to review it rather than like really rushing it. I don't know. Does that make sense? it just feels like a brutal turnaround time.
Let's look at the 15, 16.
But yeah, just in that section, because that's like a key moment in this whole process. That time frame could be a little more forgiving.
Okay, yeah, 3 weeks before the public hearing is what you're thinking for the signed copy, or 1 week.
1 week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sorry, I've got a few more of this. Sure, just go
Still
down.
good? Or do you want-
I mean, yeah, if you have stuff that's in this area of the document, because I'm gonna go further down. 15-17. Can the BOT simply refer to the planning commission upon passing the resolution for a hearing, rather than waiting 5 days for the town clerk to do it?
Yeah, I mean, the board of trustees can do that.
So maybe should just say, upon passage, it is referred to the planning commission or something along those lines, rather than making someone else do extra work.
Yeah.
15-20, posting of the sign, not posting the sign. That's just a little typo. 15-23. Is also a timing question. Even now, A, 15-23A. What does that say?
Already notice of the public hearing.
Maybe it is. Planning commission shall consider the annexation application a regular special meeting prior to the date of the public hearing. Oof, jeez.
Jennifer's.
Oh, that's what it was. Sorry, sure. Now I didn't note this properly. My question was whether or not the timing actually lines up with chapter 16. No, with whether the timing actually lines up here, just making sure that we weren't overlapping.
With the notice requirements? Right. I do need to look at
Yeah,
that.
it seemed like really close.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if it
It
actually
seems to be
lined up.
close, and I think in a lot of cases, we'd have to have a special meeting
Right.
for the planning commission. So it will probably be close.
Yeah, I just didn't want to put something in the code that was literally impossible to do.
Yeah,
And just wanted to make sure that that timing actually works out, like mathematically. So that was my question there. 15-24, PCDC, I think is Lions, Planning and Community Development.
Yeah,
Commission.
you're right.
Should be Planning Commission. 15-25. And this goes for a few things. 15-25E. The Board of Trustees may continue the hearing to a future specified date, time, and place. That provision is actually in state statute. That's page 148 for you folks. This is subsection E there. So there is state statute that dictates exactly how and why the Board of Trustees can do that. Should we reference that here? Would that be reason, like, make sense to do, like, in accordance with Colorado Revised statutes, blah, 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 blah. Because it says, like, you need to spend at least an hour talking about it. Like, you need to, it has all these rules associated with it. And we call out the revised statute
Right.
in other places, so it feels like we should do it whenever we're putting something in our code that actually refers to Colorado statute rather than our own kind of discretion.
I will add that.
And there were a few other places where I suspected that actually was the case, especially in our criteria, review criteria. Some of that is CRS required. If we could just make sure that that's noted each time it's a CRS required criteria rather than us making it up, I think that would be helpful for folks. I didn't note every single instance of that, but I can go back and do it. Criteria 12. Once we get into the criteria that deals with the comprehensive plan, this is my little hobby horse, so I want to remove the word generally from that, as I think a few of you might not be surprised. Yeah, the land to be annexed and the uses proposed for the land shall contribute to the orderly growth of the town and shall conform to the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan is what I would like it to say, not generally, but we can debate that. Just want to note that that's what I would like to see. And then my last question was 15-29 C3. 15-29 C3. I have no idea what that sentence is trying to say. Like any subdivision, filing within a subdivision that consists of more than one subdivision, filing upon the petition of the requisite number of property owners within the subdivision filing as determined pursuant to blah, blah, blah. To me, this is a word salad that I cannot unpick. I do not know what it means.
There's a CRS reference.
There it is. So is that actually taken directly from CRS, or is that adding to CRS and then referencing it? Like, I can't tell. Not asking for like an answer now necessarily, but
I will get that.
yeah, it just seems like it doesn't mean anything at all. Okay, those were my notes so far.
Oh, right, I have a few. So I'm wondering if we should align the number of acres that trigger an election with the number of acres that trigger some special things in the annexation ordinance. So in the one case it's 5, and the other case it's 10. I think Tanya mentioned this as well. So let's see if I can find the 10.
It's
The impact report is.
page 144.
And we can change that to 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, school district impact for all annexations in excess of 10 acres. Annexation impact report in excess of 10 acres. Let's see. So in our municipal code, the planning commission decides zoning of annexed properties. So I'm just pointing that out so that we do what we need to do to make it compatible with the annexation ordinance. I didn't see a traffic study in here.
I can't find it either.
Okay.
I saw it somewhere.
Yeah, I don't think it's there.
Okay.
I've been trying to, I thought it was there in my brain, but now I can't find it.
I know, I believe Boulder County requires a traffic study for changes of use on property, or like a continuation of historical use. Like for Sundance property, they were requiring a traffic study. And then
I did see it in the agreement.
oh, you did.
Oh, it's in the agreement.
Okay.
Where in the agreement? What page?
It is on page, assuming my page is correct, page 170, it is number 2, offsite street improvements. Developer has provided a transportation impact analysis prepared by.
So maybe that transportation impact analysis should be included.
But it actually says traffic study in the fifth line.
Yeah.
Is that the detailed agreement?
Annexation and development agreement.
So yes, that's a detailed one.
Okay. And I'm wondering about the density that triggers an election. It talks about the density that's in the zoning regulations for the land being annexed versus contiguous properties. So what if the properties being contiguous are in 2 different zones? And so there's 2 different densities there. Do we take the highest density and compare that to the density of the annex property that's in the zoning that's being requested for that? And then also, when we're talking about contiguous properties, what does that mean? What if there is a highway between the property that's being requested to be annexed versus the town property? So are those two properties contiguous or are they not contiguous? That's a question I have. And then I'm wondering if we should have some sort of exception in the criteria that triggers an election, an exception that the BOT could decide not to do an election and to accept the annexation request if there is a really strong benefit to the town. If the BOT could make that decision.
I think that that's very dangerous.
I do too.
Very dangerous.
I think the only way, to me, I still think that I would still like some provision in there that says if the property has been identified in a comprehensive plan as ratified by the town, because that is our most community outreach that we do in terms of town planning is the comp plan. If there was a planned area for development in the comp plan, then it would bypass an election. We don't currently do that in our comp plans, but we could choose to do that in our comp plans. And if we did, then we could streamline annexations in accordance with that comprehensive plan.
Yeah, or any 3 mile plan that we might have.
Well, I would also like the 3 mile plans attached to the comp plan, so I would like that to be the same thing.
There is some clause in here that before an annexation is approved, that we have a 3 mile plan. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We do need to have one in order to approve an annexation.
So
We
what-
don't need to maintain one at all times, but we need to have one.
I don't like the not the 3 mile, the comprehensive plan adjacent onto that, because that is a ever-changing document. There are, not everyone is in agreeing with that. Not everyone has been a part of that. And it does seem very subjective. I like it how it's written currently. That's my opinion. I think comprehensive plan, that's too fluid of a document. It could be changed arbitrarily.
Well, yeah, I think the Colorado state statutes say that if for annexations, you know, if the land use plan, the future land use plan is in the 3 mile plan or comprehensive plan, then that's, you know, can be used for annexation requests. So I think it's kind of in the Colorado revised statutes is where that comes from.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, show me a copy of the comp plan right now, and what are the areas that are deemed to be annexed in it, and who wrote it?
Obviously, there isn't one.
Well, yeah, so that's why we can't put it in there, because we don't have one that we've all unanimously agreed on. The whole town is rallied behind and had public feedback and discussion and endless amounts of discussion regarding. So to put it in there regarding a document we don't even really have, current one, that doesn't make any sense.
I'm just trying to plan for the future.
So
Loophole. It's a loophole. What that is.
the current one hasn't been updated with the new vision statement, so it was last updated in 2013. But it does have a land use chapter. In that chapter, it shows that there's no area outside of town plan for annex that's eligible for annexation. So,
there you go.
I think it's a concern. I think if we put the comp plan into this annexation agreement or the ordinance, that we're just like looking towards the future, like Eric said.
I mean, I'm fine with leaving that on as well. It just seems to me to be a mechanism for the town to not do this twice, right? So if we were to do a 3 mile plan as part of a subsequent comprehensive planning process, which a lot of towns do, right? And just that Nederland hasn't done it, but a lot of towns do that. They have planned areas for development outside of their town boundaries as part of their community planning process.
I'll be
That,
real-
that we would have to then go back to people and ask them to vote on it as well.
Well, people have changed. New people have come in from the last time a comp plan was done. And it's not like any little one lot needs to trigger an election. We're talking about developments that will affect town and resources. It's not to be taken lightly. You guys are sending back the dumbest thing.
Nobody's taking any of this lightly. Don't
This is a
start
big deal.
with things, Tanya, stop it.
Right, guys, right now, we're asking clarifying questions. I'd like to hear from Tom. Tom, do you have anything you want to ask?
No, I think
Oh, Tom, sorry.
parking study.
Tom,
I don't.
thanks, Tom.
I have a clarifying question. Is it for annexations to be approved by voters, is that pretty common? Is that it's over 5 acres, or does that sort of vary by municipality?
I would say that to have annexations approved by voters is not common at all.
And where I've
It's
seen
not.
it, it's been 10 acres.
Okay, well, that's what I feel like I've seen more often is a 10
Lions
acre.
is 10 acres.
Okay, that's where I thought I
Yes.
read it actually.
Yes.
It was 10 acres there.
Lions is 10 acres.
Okay.
And the,
Wait, it's 10 acres on one side and 5 on the other. It's like a south-north thing. That's what we
Yeah,
determined.
one side of
that's
town.
true, yeah.
But that's also because they had a planned area for annexation on one side of town as part of their community planning process, and so they streamlined it for that purpose. That makes sense.
Okay, and so it's rare that it goes to voters, is what I heard you said, and then more common is that it's the 10 acres.
Right, when it does go to voters, that's what I've seen is the 10 acres.
Okay, thank you.
So I wonder if 10 acres would be more appropriate for us, because that's more common. And there's a lot involved with an election. Taking things to the voters and having that additional step. Do we need that additional step on annexations that are less than 10 acres?
Why do we want to take it to the voters?
Why?
Yeah, because the impact of a large annexation, is pretty diverse, and, everything from traffic to use of resources. And it gives a chance for, both sides of the argument to explain the pros and cons, but like, I don't think I think it's dangerous to put the hands of this. Well, yeah, I think it's wise to have buy-in when you're doing a major change to town. Like, people who live here, have to say.
Yeah, and as far as like the traffic and resources, that's something that town staff will evaluate. We're not going to accept a property for annexation if we can't provide water treatment and wastewater treatment and the roads and the developer or the property owner who's annexing in, it will be responsible for a lot of those costs. So, and the traffic, that should be something that would be analyzed by staff as well too.
I mean, for me, the biggest reason is because that's what most people that I've spoken to have told me they want. And,
Yeah, this is Tanya. I don't think,
members of the community, not individuals, so trying to just do what's right by the folks who.
Do people articulate if it's the difference between 5 acres and 10 acres?
Oh, absolutely not.
No,
No,
it's not for the, yeah, so
it's
it's,
just that they want to say.
Mhm.
But I do think I personally would be in favor of 10 acres. But I also don't mind if it's 5. That doesn't throw a huge wrench in the works for me. I mean, I do think that, under the CRS, right, that it applies to a city as large as any that Colorado has, as well as a tiny town like ours. The impact of a 10-acre annexation on a large city is obviously minimal compared to the impact it is on a town. Right? Like these are different contexts that we're talking about. So Colorado law doesn't really distinguish between the two, but it explicitly says make rules for your town in the Colorado statutes, right? It calls out that we can do that. We have the ability and the authority to put whatever rules in place are best for your, small town or big city, whatever it might be. So to me, it does seem that we're a small enough town that we have opportunities to operate in a more directly democratic way, and we should take those opportunities where we got them because they're rare in this world.
So thinking from the applicant's point of view, if they have to spend a lot of money and a lot of time and energy on an application, and then it goes to the voters and, it doesn't get approved. So I'm wondering if there's some steps that should be deferred until after the vote is taken. And that goes for staff and,
Well,
the board too.
that's a double-edged sword as well for the applicant. Because if the applicant doesn't have all those things in place and isn't able to advocate with all the data information that they've gathered through the application process to the community, then they're also gonna face uncertainty, and uncertainty often leads to failing at the ballot box, right?
Yeah, that's true. And if there wasn't an election, all that work has to be done, and the application could still be disapproved based on the results of that data gathering and analysis.
How much does an election cost for that?
2,000 to 3,000.
And then, just to be clear, the petitioner, the annexation petitioner pays for the cost of the election.
Right, and it would be prorated if there was already an election scheduled. Right.
I think so.
I think that's what it says in here at least. So it would be cheaper if there was already an election.
And they could theoretically put it back on the ballot the following election.
12 years, 12 years, 12 months.
12 months later, they
Yeah,
can.
not within a year. I see. That's Colorado statute. We can't do anything about that.
Can we hear public comment?
Yeah, any more
I
clarifying?
wanted to circle back to what Karen was saying about the contingency and density. How does that want to be explained to be more specific? Do you guys?
Ways can validate contingent, contiguity, contiguity.
Contiguity, yes. No, the roadways don't. No. So if you're abutting another parcel, whatever that property would be, the zoning of that property. But I think one question is to answer is if you have two properties, and what zoning do you want to tie an election to?
Well, right now, the way that it's worded basically suggests that if there's greater density, it has to be an election. Like on any parcel.
Well, there,
But if the two properties have different densities.
Right, but overall, the density would be increasing, so it would trigger an election, because it just says the road zoning of the property to be annexed has greater density than the existing zoning of those properties. So any parcel that would change to an increase of zoning would trigger an election.
thinking of sprawl, I think if the property is contiguous to high density area and a low density area, that that it has less of an impact on less of a problem with sprawl than if the property was contiguous only to low density and it wanted to go to higher density. Because usually you're dense in the center, and then as you move out, you become less dense. So, so maybe we should choose and then you have like, how large is the contiguous property, and so maybe you choose the largest one.
Well, the way that you could, to me, the easiest way to clarify this statement, just from a grammar perspective, I'm not talking about what I think it should say, but to me would be any annexation of any property smaller than 5 acres in size is not exempt with the proposed zoning of any property to be annexed has greater density than the existing zoning of the contiguous properties or any contiguous properties in the town, right? Like that way, It would trigger an election if zoning would increase density. No matter what. If any of those parcels would be an increase in density, then it would trigger an election. And that would clarify that sentence at least. To me.
Okay.
It's just saying any, rather than just the property. You just say any property. This is B2 of annexations to be approved by voters, section 15-31, page 152.
So if you have two properties in the town already, one is low density residential, the other one is mountain residential.
Right.
And if the proposed zoning is low density residential, then you think an election should be required then?
I'm not saying I think it should be. I'm saying the way that I interpret the way this is written, that's what should probably happen. And it would clarify it by saying, putting the word any in front of the property.
Well, I would be okay going the other way.
Me too.
Just thinking about, the density issue, I think, is all about sprawl.
So I do think that would have to be rewritten in order to explicitly meet that.
Right, so I think what would be helpful is direction as to what you want to require, what's necessary for a vote.
I'm more and more coming down on the side that I'm not sure that a density increase should trigger a vote. And I know that Trustee Corvallin disagrees with me very much on that, but that's my current feeling on it.
So, we're going to have, we will have the applicant does recommend a zoning. And I think, and then the planning commission gets involved in that too, I think, as far as what the zoning will be of annexed area.
Well, there needs to be a zoning hearing simultaneously with the planning commission hearing, according to this.
Because we can think about other zones too, like commercial, industrial. Do we want those to be adjacent to residential areas? And as far as the density is concerned, it seems almost like that question could be answered by the planning commission when they're doing the zoning assignment. They could look at what the program, choosing or not choosing a zone that would create sprawl.
I'm gonna have us move to public comment.
Again, I'm sorry, this is Tanya. I think my biggest fears with all of this is giving power to planning commission, to BOT, to 5 or 7 people. Half of them aren't even elected. They're appointed. Some people run for this because they have interests that aren't necessarily selfish, selfless. And to put this in a document where we give all the power to BOT and Planning Commission and other commissions without letting voters and residents have a voice is very dangerous, in my opinion. I feel like density is more important than acreage, because 10 acres with 10 houses isn't that impactful, but 2 acres with 100 houses would be. And you're saying, oh, well, the Planning Commission can decide on that zoning. We'll let them pick it out. Again, these people are going to change in the future. We're not going to know everybody. That's just what I think. You guys obviously don't.
I actually agree with what you think, and on this note, I'd like to move to public comment. So,
Don Bonhoeffer already submitted interest, and so do you want to start online?
yes. Switch it on. We're going to go online to Dawn. We're going to go online first, then we'll bring it into the room.
And then Don, just a reminder, you'll press *6.
Comments from Tom.
I asked him, and he's really good about only talking when he has something to say. What? Anyone out there, or Don, have you been able to?
Kathleen, who has her hand up, but she'll need to call in.
Nothing you want to start calling in, and we'll hopefully Don will come in later and make it happen. Otherwise,
Kathleen, is that you?
Kathleen, if that's you, you can go ahead.
Yeah, okay, sorry. It's really bad sound online today, a lot of buzz. I want to say thank you to Eric for doing such a thorough review of the language. You pointed out most everything that I was concerned about, so I want to thank you for that. Yeah, when we copy and paste language, we need to be mindful. I also want to just second everything Tanya just said right now, and there's a big difference in 10 properties on 10 acres, 10 houses on 10 acres and units somewhere else. My suggestion when it comes to zoning is if you're being annexed in, then you obviously are touching part of town property which is already zoned, and nobody needs to worry about changing zoning of any kind. I can't imagine you're going to build a industrial or central business district next to neighborhoods anyway. So I think if you're being annexed in, you're being annexed into whatever property you're touching, and that would be the zoning. So I don't think it has to go through some huge process. But I do think that large projects should be going before the voters for sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate it. Don, are you with us? Don, any other public comment out there online? Real quick for you folks that are listening online, if you could shoot Miranda or someone an email about who sounds good and who doesn't. We tried a sound check today. We thought we'd made things better, but it sounds like we still have some work to do. So I'm going to bring the public comment into the room. Ron and Kaylee both like to speak. It's up to you. Yeah, it sounds quiet here, but just.
Okay, that's probably better. You have two issues you've been discussing tonight. One was the water issue where you have a point, so I thought I heard, come up with a reservoir. Reservoir upstream of the town would be ideal. And Kayla Evans owns property where the reservoir could go. And I think the overall macro view that you may want to look at is there's a relationship. She also wants to have a subdivision. And if you make the subdivision or the route to get a subdivision so difficult that she can't do it, you might find, and I'm not saying it would ever happen, Kayla is one of our upstanding citizens. She's well respected in the community, but you should think about the fact that she has the wherewithal to solve the town's water problems. And equate those two things carefully among yourselves outside of the board meetings and see if you can't come to compromise on both issues.
Thanks, Ron.
Kayla Evans, 1250 Eldora Road. Thank you for the unsolicited cheerleading, Ron. Two contradictory thoughts tonight. On the one hand, we had a person call in and say, why doesn't the board just make these decisions? Why are you going to send it to the planning board? The planning board is not elected. They don't have the power. They don't have this. And then the next time you're going, okay, why are you going to, don't let the planning board, don't let the town board, don't, put it to the people. You're elected. It's contradictory. Think about that a little bit. The other thing is, I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. You keep talking about 3 Mile and annexation and big things, and you're making policy based on hypotheticals that you think might happen in the future. But if you look at this town, we are in a box. We can't really grow very many directions. Have you really looked at who owns the property around this town? How much of it is Forest Service? How much of it is conservation easement, how much of it is private land in what kind of tracts. So when you are making these policies based on sending annexation to a vote of the people, if that's the direction the town ultimately wants to go, understand that you also have precedent set by annexing Caribou Ridge into town without a vote. So look at all of the possibilities that that could create for the town. I just think that, and I have a question. Are you writing this annexation policy that's going into the town here? Are you just using the template from Lyons? We're two totally different communities, totally different people. They are somewhat similar in certain areas, but I think we are unique and maybe we have unique problems and we have unique answers. And we're not looking at them as much as I hope we should and could. My discussion, I have talked with Jesse, I have talked with Karen, I've talked to Eric. I look forward to speaking to you and to you. I've talked to Tom. I would love to speak to Tanya if she is open to a conversation. Because I think that, in my perspective, what you're doing is you are putting so much pressure on the applicant with no guarantee of any kind of annexation possibility. And I think things, when the onus is all on the applicant, I know I'm going to run on.
Thanks.
Anyway.
Maybe.
I'd like to keep hearing from Kayla myself. I don't know.
Conversation with Kayla.
I'm happy to talk to anybody later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone, Doug, were you able to join us? Star Search? If not, I'd like to bring it back to the board, and really I want to bring it just to the simple question before the vote. Does the Board of Trustees have any questions, comments, or recommendations regarding the draft annexation ordinance or the draft annexation agreement? Well, and I have to. Okay.
Are you gonna take a
Let's
recess?
go ahead and take, you guys mind if we take a 5-minute break? Thank you. Is that for this?
Can you hear me, Miranda?
Hi, Don. Would you allow Don to give public
Can you hear me,
comments?
Miranda?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, finally. I guess I did. I had to call back in.
I just asked Mayor Giblin if he'd allow you public comment, and I believe the answer is yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Okay, let me know when.
Go ahead.
I couldn't hear.
You can go now, Don.
Okay. So I would just like to thank the board, first of all. Thank you, Mayor, for letting me speak because I was having technical difficulties. I would like to encourage the board that they don't need to decide, they can decide to table this tonight. That can be your decision. And to examine this more, because I was very discouraged when I listened to the work session that a lot of people had not done their homework and really didn't even know the difference between annexation and IGA. So this has been, like Kayla said, this has been going on for 20 years, but this is like, this board is way down the road. This issue has come up to numerous boards, and I would like to call out the elephant in the room even further because it hasn't been named, but everybody's talking about Bobcat Ridge development, Kayla's project, even though it hasn't been named. And I think there's a great danger in making an ordinance that is directed toward somebody's development in their mind without taking each project from of an annexation on its own merit. What if you had a strip club that wanted to annex in? That's a very, very different thing than a housing development that provide with a lot of other services that includes parking and other community amenities that Bobcat Ridge incorporates. So I would like to encourage the board to take a step back and not push so hard. If there's new members on this board, take a step back and take time to process what's going on. Find out what you're dealing with before you make decisions that are going to affect the community for 20 years down the road. It's a very dangerous thing to micromanage annexation. So the IGA is one thing. You can let that lapse and you can come back and you can take a little bit of time on this. Take a breath. Please consider each project on its own merit. What else did I write down? Elections, I would like to point out, Tanya said an election is needed because things change and the boards change. So do the people in this town. And quite frankly, 50% of this town are renters, and at any given time, there's probably 50% of the town that's new, that would have no idea of the history, what's been going on, and would vote on it, be like, oh, we love Nederland as it is because they just got here. Of course you do. I would also like to point out that a loophole is one thing, flexibility is another. I'd like the board to consider that. Way too much emphasis is being put on how Lions did things. We are different communities. I agree with Kayla that that way too much is being put on the property owner prior. Annexation is like, several weeks ago, y'all voted on a concept project. It's a concept. And the details are to come. Voting on an annexation, yes, we'll let you annex, and then the specifics come after the fact. Specifics ahead of time. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. So, this point, public comment is closed. And want to bring it back to the board. I have just one correction on the aim. It's small potatoes compared to everything else we're talking about on the first page. The previous discussion was September 13th work session, not 12. So again, I just want to have us focus. We got, I know I have two things in other business yet to come. They should be short, but we got to get on them. And all we're doing today is, do we have any questions, comments, or recommendations regarding a draft or annexation ordinance or draft annexation agreement?
So I think this comes down to a question of the election. Rest of what is required in here, I mean, and a lot of it is not from Lions. I want to point out to everyone that we had many specific things that we put in here that were Nederland specifically from us. But that elections, to me, there's two things going on. There's the opportunity for democratic process at the ballot box. That's not the only kind of democratic process there is, right? There's public comment at the hearing, like there's many other places where this can happen. So I'm weighing that right now in my mind. I'm weighing the democratic process that's possible through the election, and also to, also what Tanya said does make a lot of sense to me. We don't want there to be an incentive financially for people to run for this board so that they can get what they want out of the town, right? Like we don't want to create that kind of a process either. Not that anyone right now is doing that, but 25 years down the line, we don't want to have an ordinance that allows for that kind of taking advantage of the town. On the other side of things, and yeah, we can reject it out of hand to begin with. Like there's lots of other things the BOT can do. On the other hand, I am also afraid of NIMBYism. There are folks in the community who might want to see it stay the same way, who might not have a vested interest in the changes that are sorely needed for other folks. I think that means cheaper housing alternatives. That means securing our water supply for the inevitable potential growth of the community, which is something we cannot stop. Like, you can claim that you can say you're going to make a troll toll on the bridge and charge people to come through, right? But you can't stop growth from happening to some extent because that's just the way the world operates. So on one hand, we have to balance the sort of, impulse that I think people have to control how other people live. And on the other hand, democratic process and the opportunity to do that. So I'm not myself absolutely certain. I think that we can find a balance between these two things. I don't think it has to be an ultra restrictive, ordinance that demands that everything goes to the ballot box, and absolves the BOT of all responsibility. But at the same time, I don't want to see an ordinance that, gives financial incentive to running for the BOT because you might have a particular project that you want to develop. So those are things that I'm weighing. I don't have that answer. To me, 10 acres just seemed like what other people were doing, But maybe 10 acres isn't what Nederland needs to do. I know now it says 5, but I think that's pretty restricted.
I'd be interested in finding out experiences that other communities have had with holding elections for annexations and what the outcomes of those have been, if they've been favorable outcomes for the community or not.
I mean, my suspicion is that it's going to be hard to pass an annexation. That's my suspicion. And I think that the things that are required here in this application checklist that we've sort of laid out, that most of them, except for a few things that we've already discussed in this meeting, that most of those things actually help the applicant's cause rather than hurt it, right? Having those things in place, make it more likely to get passed. That's why I put them in there. And I just want to make it clear, like, we're writing this so that annexation is possible, not so that annexation is not possible, right? So for a long time in Nederland, annexation was not possible. This is intended to make it possible in accordance with the way this community operates as much as we can. So just wanted that out there. This is the goal. Yeah, I don't know what the answer is there. I think that having all the material in front of the people is going to be better than having too many questions, right? Because if people have questions, I think they're going to vote no. So if all those are answered as much as possible, more likely that if we have put it to the voters, that means we would have approved it, right? I don't think the BOT would put it to the voters if we weren't, generally in agreement with the plan. So the whole idea here is that we are saying, look, folks, we believe in this project. We believe in this application. Vote yes. We're basically saying that, even though we technically can't, right? I don't know what the magic numbers are.
I mean, if it's a good project, the project will speak for itself, and it should pass. And I think 10 acres is a lot of land, or if it's different from the adjacent density or zoning, let's use that word, because I was just looking at Boulder County's annexation policy, and it's pretty much straightforward if you are zoned what you're next to. So that seems like how we would do it. If they want a change of zoning, that's that's a different issue.
Oh, the last thing I wanted to point out, sorry, in my little tirade, was that most of the things that we're asking for are going to need to be done in any kind of SRU or plan unit development anyway. Like most of this information is going to need to be generated anyway. So I really believe that the only real question here is the election. Like everything else is kind of part of the course. It's going to need to be done by anyone doing this kind of development.
I think the big risk with the election is if it fails, then we have to go and wait 12 months to put it back on the ballot. We've lost 12 months that are valuable, precious 12 months towards our water rights in this particular instance.
Yeah.
Not to say that that will be the case for all future annexation bids. At the moment, I feel that time is of the essence. And I would like for us to retain a degree of agility to respond to the moment as a BOT. And I feel our focus should be to secure an agreement with the Evans family as soon as possible.
I just want to point out, we are talking about making an ordinance. We're not talking about a specific thing. And I think that's important that we remember that. And I know it's super related, and the timing is what the timing is at the moment. You know, we're just debating what we're actually discussing and giving comments and questions, recommendations for these ordinances and agreements. And without a doubt, I mean, the elephant in the room, everyone likes to say, but Bobcat Ridge is huge and it's current and it could be critical without a doubt. And this is being written for more than just one thing.
Of course.
And I also agree with Don that we need to
The present
learn
moment
more.
forms are forecasting,
Yeah.
That's all I guess I'm saying is I think we need to weigh the elephant as we think about making a rule that will apply to everything.
Why don't we put a survey out to people like we do for everything else?
Go ahead. Thanks. Go ahead, Karen.
Do we know of any other properties that want to annex it into the town?
I've talked with people off and on about it, but there are nothing quite like what's before you in the Bobcat Ridge. But people are interested and they ask quite often.
I mean, there were a number of parcels in the draft IGA amendment. It's still on Boulder County's website. Anybody can go and look exactly which parcels were there. I think there were 5 or 6 that were marked in red there as the primary planning area for annexation. Most of those would not require an election.
Yeah, the Sundance was one. And then the Caribou Road, they just did not want to be part of that IGA, so they're not in there. Ridge Road was in there at one point. They didn't want to be in. And then I think there were some town properties, right? Some town related, no, nothing municipal.
No, and everyone I've talked to are just individual parcels, not a full subdivision.
Just like a house
Yeah.
here and there.
Right, parcels of land.
And do you know why they want to be annexed?
They're interested in paying their property taxes to Nederland. That's the biggest motivation. And then also our building process is a lot less cumbersome than Boulder County's.
That's true. Hey, Tom. Trustee Mahol. What are your thoughts?
What's your question? I'm working.
Just going back, we've gotten through clarifying questions.
Right.
Public comment. We're kind of back to just a final discussion before we wrap up about any questions, comments, or recommendations regarding the ordinance or the agreement as it's written.
No, I think we're going to talk about the IGA at some point. I think we're coming towards some opinion on where that goes? Out of that flows annexation, and I think we've discussed it as much as I want to tonight.
I agree.
So we don't have any recommendations to town staff on language regarding triggering an election.
I think we had, there was some discussion of changing 5 acres to 10 acres. So maybe we could get a nod on that if we want to go with 10 instead of 5.
Yeah, I nod. I would also want the town staff to investigate other communities and what they have for elections, because I was pretty sure on the paperwork that Eric had given us, Lyons and all the other ones had elections triggered at certain amount of acreage. It is more common than Jennifer Matson said, and I'd like more documentation on that. And I would also like a survey put out for the community so they know what we're talking about, because I feel like more people would be calling in and being aware if they were paying attention, but they're not. So we should try and get them to pay attention and see what they think and what they want, and maybe a survey, since we do those for everything else.
I like the idea of a survey for sure. And then I think Karen had said it'd be great to know, kind of get a sense of some of the results where there have been elections.
I'm gonna have spoken to Lyons mayor about it, and like it hasn't actually come up a lot for them, so they don't have a lot of experience in the code actually being applied. But if there are others out there.
It looks like, just on a Google search, that Lyons voters approved Planet Bluegrass
Yeah, that was their,
annexation.
but everyone knew that everyone was gonna do that anyway. Like that was kind of a done deal way in advance.
But it worked.
Yeah, it worked.
I would ask if there's a desire for a survey that there be a trustee designated to work with staff. That's always really helpful before releasing a
I
survey.
can draft a survey questions. I think that the only thing, I think we need to direct towns have to do something here, otherwise we're bringing back exactly the same thing next time. So, maybe we could just see 3 versions. Is that possible? So a version that cleans up the language as it is now by, specifying, what kinds of properties need to be adjacent to this kind of property in order to trigger an election, so that this version is clean. And then maybe a version that says 10 acres, and maybe a version that says 10 acres with no density trigger.
So one that says 10 acres with a density trigger, or one that says it with a.
Yeah.
Also curious.
Or maybe one with just density as the trigger and not acreage. Because to me, that's the bigger picture than the actual land.
So I'm sorry, what's curious is that we don't know of any other communities that trigger an election on an annexation that would increase density.
Well, a lot of communities say it has to be the same zoning that it's adjacent to. So we could just make it that be the way it is, and then without that, they can't do it. Or we could say if they want to, a special change.
What community is that, Lyons?
Boulder County.
Well, they're a little bit of a different community than we are, in that it's a county and not a town with a central business district and a dense residential area.
Right. We have more. So then if you're next to that, you would do that.
I'm also a little bit curious, in this whole balance between democratic process and having us make decision. Karen, you brought up something at the very beginning. What if the need of the land, or it's so outweighed anything, for the municipality that's worth the BOT making a move on? I'm curious if there are any communities out there that have guidelines in place for their BOT to make sort of an emergency. I don't know if emergency is the right name, but to be able to make a move like that when the use of the land so outweighs and is the most beneficial for the community.
I think what we're talking about is, in that case, just don't have an election, that the BOT decides.
Yes,
to annex.
the way to do that, I think, would be to say that the BOT may refer it to an election, basically, if they want to, or not.
And then are there certain guidelines that hold the BOT accountable? Because, right, what you're saying is, oh, we don't want to get folks on the BOT that could use it for personal benefit or whatnot. And so what those benefit or what those stipulations may be.
I think that would be illegal to do that.
It would be, but there might still.
That's a very complicated thing that I don't think we need to, but.
Well, the one thing too with, I have some concerns with making the requirement for votes based on some subjective standards, really difficult in application and difficult to give notice to the applicants. Is there going to be a vote or not? And they won't know until you vote on an ordinance approving the annexation petition. I mean, and how do you apply that? I mean, some of those standards would be really difficult to apply. So if you want to give it to the voters, my recommendation is to have objective standards.
Do you feel like you have enough direction? Because I want to give us time for other business.
Yes, but I also think it would be helpful to know when you want to have this back in front of you. You have an end date with the IGA expires December 31st. You can put a moratorium in place on any annexation, so this doesn't have to be done by the 31st, but it would be helpful to know when you want it brought back.
Well, I feel like I said very clearly a while back that I want to get this done before the IGA expires. And I would not like if it extended beyond that point. So I would like to put it on the agenda again before December 31st.
I would too.
As an action.
I'm trying to look at, well.
Is what I'd like to see.
Okay. We'll have to just look at the agenda forecaster as to when.
But I think it would be helpful for Attorney Madsen to know that information now, if it's
Okay.
possible to assess, so there's a timeline for working on this.
Forecaster.
I mean, if we had something with 3 versions as an action item, as a name, then we could vote on whichever one someone made a motion on and majority will pass it.
I mean, is it too late to say 30 days or too soon?
I think the only thing is just the election deal.
Yep. I think that's what we're going to do some time.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just need to all know where we stand on it and then vote accordingly and see what we end up with. If we can't come to a unanimous conclusion in a discussion item, which obviously we can't.
But do remember that whatever you do now is going to be a document that will be the future. So future developments like Sundance or whatever would then have the same abilities. And if for good or for bad, whatever people want.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking.
Make an exception.
Want it to be an action item, if we had, and we're just kind of giving good feedback to slow down and make sure we make the right decision to understand IGA and annexation. So, I mean, I guess I'm looking at November 1st or November 15th. I can. This month is definitely, no. Yeah, I mean, I would say the 15th is, well, if we did the first, I wouldn't want it to be an action item. I think the 15th gives us more time, but maybe we need more time, another time to discuss it before we know where we're at and then bring it as an action item.
I mean,
Because then we would have all these versions.
Well, yeah, because we need the results of the survey and more discussion regarding what the community wants.
I'm hearing a strong preference for an election Tanya and Billy. Open-mindedness on that matter is essentially interpreting wrong there.
I think you've got me.
So we can make a decision with,
So, I mean, what about your ideas that, you know, obviously, then the majority is either undecided or doesn't want an election, but, what about a survey that kind of gets more public input? That's where I was just like, we are kind of cruising.
I think that, I'm surveys, yeah, that's good. And we have, you know, public comment, we have public hearings, we have a democracy in place now. And it obviously can always be improved.
People need to be educated and know if there's all of a sudden urgency. That's something.
And
That they didn't think there was urgency.
yes.
No one realizes, people just see specific, you know, Bobcat Ridges, they call out elk and traffic and cloudy and all this. What they don't hear is, want your water rights in perpetuity or you want water? So no one knows that, no one gets it, not enough people understand what's at stake. That's just one issue though, we're coming to an ordinance.
But it would be incumbent upon both us to be very clear, to refer something to the voters, right? To be very clear about why we're doing it and why we think that it's a worthwhile project. And it would be incumbent upon, obviously, the applicant to make those same noises, right? And as individuals, I think we can also talk about it, just not as using town resources. So, I mean, that's also democratic process, right? You just tell people, and then they vote, right? And then hopefully they vote the way you want them to.
Yeah, I don't want for us to, you know, make our effort to improve democracy, have to move forward lockstep with this, our ability to get this particular deal done. And, I do want to continue to improve democracy. It's something I care about, and I think we do that here as this board. We'll make strides in that direction. I think we're a great team and we're great people, and we will do that in our tenure. So
I'm not sure what you're saying. Jesse, what are you saying?
I would like to say, I'm just concerned with the time and the fact that there's more things to cover. And how about we kind of survey and then have these drafts ready to look at for the first. And then I think an action item would be later once we see the drafts. And we have four different drafts, not three.
I mean, this is why I think it's a really nice idea to have the exemption in there for something that's in a primary planning area, in a comp plan or a 3-mile plan, so that there can be streamlined projects, right, that have importance to the town. Right, that's how you establish that importance, right, is by putting it in a plan that the town has basically ratified. So I still think, I would love to see some language that suggested something along those lines during minutes as a, you know, fourth option, I guess.
Well,
I would like us to tell you that by the first, we want some versions. If people have specific things they want to add, they can email Miranda, Jennifer, and I think the survey has to start right away for me to get it on, to have some of the votes. Call it quits on this for tonight.
Survey out, people don't know all the information. You're asking them to make a decision about something that they are uninformed about.
So we're not doing a survey in Bobcat Ridge, just to be clear. Like this is a survey.
It would just be related to triggering an election on an annexation, and that's it. Right? Just be, do you think there should be an election or not? Do you think there should be? Do you think there should? No, I'm saying what the survey would say.
You can take the survey.
Please take the survey, Kayla.
And encourage others to.
Just don't take it twice.
That's
take it 3 times.
right. Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
honestly, for a good project will pass.
Yep.
Well, if
People-
you're so afraid that the public doesn't want something, but we're willing to push it through at the sake of a annexation policy that will be in place forever, that's something to think about inside yourselves.
Thanks. And then, no, we're gonna move to other business. And I know one thing we'll talk about, I'll be open and I'm an executive session for the second. Sure, one, yes. Did you want to touch base on?
Yeah, can we direct town staff to make it a policy that it just goes straight to the PC so we can streamline this process a bit? Because that actually would make this a lot faster. You know, if it just came to the PC, yeah.
What?
Any land use.
So we just got other business, we're talking about right-of-way vacations and just moving it to the PC as a first.
Well, all disposal of public lands.
Yeah.
The land vacation policy include a requirement that all right-of-way vacation requests go first.
Yeah. When we get it, we already have the recommendation. Don't have to have this conversation about whether or not we were.
Yeah, it's important for everyone not to have lots and lots of meetings to get these.
So for clarification, do you want this brought back then as a consent item on a future agenda?
That would work for me.
Okay.
Great, and I think, when I announced the executive session, do I need to talk about? Thank you. That is. I move to go into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024B to receive legal advice related to an appeal by Crossmind before the Mind Reclamation Board. There is a second. So could you call?
Trustee Corvalon?
Thanks. Caleb.
Yeah.
Trustee Whitmore?
Yes.
Trustee Severs?
Yes.
Pro Tem Mahone?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Sterling?
Yes.
And Trustee Cruz Ismail?
Yes.
And so online there is a bunch of folks still.
Right, so we're gonna need a little bit of time to kind of, so anyone who's online will need to leave and we'll work on helping with that process.
Okay.
And then we'll lock the meeting, so we need a little bit of time.
Okay.